I never imagined that a single piece of paper could make a man feel like his entire life had been scooped out and tossed onto the floor like scraps. That divorce decree hit me harder than any punch I'd taken in my younger days. She walked out with the house, the retirement savings, the car I restored by hand, even the dog that used to sleep at my feet. And there I was, standing outside the courthouse with nothing but a cardboard box and a pair of hands that suddenly felt too old and too empty. But if you'll stay with me, I'll tell you how a man can lose everything and still come out standing taller than he ever did before. And if stories like this give you something to think about on your own path, well, you're always welcome to come back and hear more. I remember the day she left like it was carved into the inside of my eyelids. She didn't slam the door, didn't yell, didn't even look back. She just said she was tired of carrying dead weight and walked out with half my life packed into her SUV. She had a new man waiting for her, a sleek talker in tailored suits who promised her the world. She called him stability. She called me a mistake she should have corrected years earlier. And I won't lie to you, that kind of talk stays with a man. For a while, I blamed myself for not being enough. I took the janitor job at the local manufacturing plant because it was the only work I could find on short notice, and I told myself it was temporary. I kept my head down, did the night shift, swept floors, emptied trash, and tried not to think about the empty spaces in my life. No home, no wife, no family left on my side. Just the hum of machines and the smell of cleaning chemicals that followed me home to the cheap room I rented behind a gas station. But here's what she never knew. Long before the divorce, back when we were younger and money was tight, I'd made a small investment in a struggling startup. It was nothing back then, just a tiny company trying to stay afloat. I didn't tell her about it because she always called my ideas foolish. She said I was a dreamer with no follow-through, so I kept that one thing to myself. And as the marriage fell apart, I forgot about it too. Until one night, sitting in that tiny rental room with peeling wallpaper, I checked the old email address tied to the investment. There were messages stacked up like forgotten letters in a dusty attic. The company had grown, expanded, and through some miracle of time, patience, and dumb luck, my little investment had turned into something far bigger than I ever imagined. I didn't say a word to anyone, not to my co-workers, not to the landlord, and certainly not to my ex. I just kept showing up to that night shift, sweeping floors while the numbers in that account kept climbing. And the strangest part, it didn't feel like revenge. Not then. It felt like a quiet place inside me was waking up after years of sleep. But life has a funny way of weaving paths together. Because while I was sweeping floors in silence, she was out there building a new life with her polished new man. A new apartment, a new lifestyle, and soon she would be starting a new job. She bragged about it on social media, saying she was leveling up, finally entering the career she deserved. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was who owned the company she had just signed a contract with. The way I found out she'd joined the company still makes me shake my head. It wasn't through some dramatic announcement or a phone call or even gossip. It was a plain message from HR, forwarded to me because of my role as majority owner. They needed final sign-off on a list of new hires. I opened the document expecting a bunch of names I didn't recognize, maybe a few transfers from other branches. And then I saw it, her name, sitting there as clear as day, like fate had typed it herself. I stared at that name for a long time. My first instinct was to laugh, not out of spite, but out of disbelief. Life really does spin in circles. I remember leaning back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything that had happened over the past year. The divorce, the nights cleaning floors, the slow climb back into my own skin. And now this. She had no clue that the company she bragged about joining, the one she told friends was her new start, answered to me. But I wasn't interested in revenge. I wasn't interested in making a scene or embarrassing her. That's not who I am. I signed off on the hires like I always do and went back to my quiet work. I figured she'd go about her life, and I'd go about mine. We'd share a company without ever crossing paths in a way that mattered. But life didn't want it to be that clean. 2 weeks later, she walked into my night shift without noticing me. She was giving a tour to new employees during the company's daytime orientation. I was just finishing up mopping the break room floor. She walked right past me, laughing with her new co-workers, boasting about the position she'd landed. She didn't recognize me at first. I guess that's what happens when someone hasn't looked at you with real attention in years. But when she did notice me, it was like she'd seen a ghost. Her eyes widened, her smile dropped, and for a moment, she couldn't decide whether to be angry, embarrassed, or confused. She finally settled on anger, pointing at me like I was some stain she needed removed. "Why are you here?" she hissed under her breath. "Don't tell me you work here now. God, this is pathetic." I didn't react. I didn't defend myself. I just kept working. The supervisor leading the tour looked uncomfortable, like he'd accidentally stepped into someone else's argument. She pushed further, saying loud enough for the group to hear, "You see what I dealt with? No ambition, no drive. I upgraded." The group laughed nervously. I didn't blame them. They didn't know the story. They just saw a woman talking down to a man with a mop. But her words didn't cut the way they once did, because I knew something she didn't. Every person in that room, including her, was on my payroll, and one day, when the time was right, the truth would slip into her world on its own. After the tour moved on, I went back to finishing my shift. But the encounter lit a spark in the building. Whispers started. Staff talked. People wondered what history lay between us. I never answered. I just did my work, quiet as ever. Her new role put her on a different floor, far away from the custodial roots, so I didn't see her often. But every now and then, I'd overhear her talking about how she was rising, how she finally found a company that recognized her worth. Meanwhile, HR sent me periodic updates on her performance. She was doing well, better than I expected. There was talent in her, no doubt. She just never used it to build with me. Funny how people find their hustle once they think they've traded up. Then came the moment things shifted. HR needed expansion approvals. Several managers were being considered for promotions, including her. They needed my signature. The file landed on my desk late one evening, attached to a note from the director. "This candidate is strong. Recommend approval." I set the papers down and stared at her name again. My ex-wife. My ex who took the house, the savings, and everything she could carry. The ex who mocked me in front of strangers while standing in a company she didn't know I owned. And here she was being recommended for a promotion that would put her in a position where she'd be in meetings that required my presence. Now, most people in stories like these choose the path of revenge right about here. They deny the promotion. They call HR. They make a scene. But I've lived long enough to know revenge rots a man from the inside. No, what I wanted was clarity. Clarity for her, clarity for me. So I signed the approval. Every line, every page, she earned the promotion. And I wasn't going to take something from her just because she once took something from me. But what I didn't expect was what came next. Because promotions at that level come with training sessions. And those sessions? They're held directly with upper leadership. The kind where nobody hides behind email signatures. The kind where she would have to walk into a conference room and see exactly who was sitting at the head of the table. I remember the morning of that leadership session like it was yesterday. The sky was gray, not the kind that brings rain, but the kind that hangs low and quiet, like it's waiting for something to happen. I got to the office early, as I always did, long before anyone else showed up. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat in that conference room, looking out over the parking lot as the first few cars rolled in. I wasn't nervous, I wasn't excited. I was just steady, like a man watching a river finally return to its natural path after years of twisting the wrong way. The session was scheduled for 8 o'clock sharp. One by one, the new managers filed in. They greeted me politely, some with a firm handshake, some with that timid smile people give when they realize the man in front of them signs their checks. I welcomed them, asked about their departments, tried to keep things warm but professional. I'd done these sessions 100 times. They never rattled me. But I'll admit this. When the door opened at 8:03 and she walked in, even my old heart skipped a beat. She looked different from the woman I used to know, sharper, more polished. She dressed like someone who wanted to be seen, wanted to be heard. There was a confidence in her steps I hadn't seen in years, but there was something else too, something behind the eyes. A flicker, maybe. A tension she carried without realizing it. She didn't see me at first. She was fussing with her notebook, her phone, the little name tag clipped to her blazer. She took a seat near the middle of the table and kept her eyes down, probably thinking she could slip in unnoticed. But the manager beside her leaned in and whispered, "That's the owner." I saw her shoulders stiffen before her head slowly lifted. Her eyes landed on me the same way someone might look at a photo they found buried in a drawer. Familiar enough to sting, distant enough to unsettle them. She blinked once, twice, and then a third time, like her brain was refusing to process what her eyes were reporting. Her fingers tightened around her pen. I could hear the plastic creak. I didn't say a word. I just nodded gently, the way you greet a stranger you might have met once in passing. It wasn't a performance. It was peace. Real peace. The kind that comes after you've allowed the dust of your life to settle naturally without kicking it up again. I started the session as if nothing unusual was happening. I talked about leadership, about integrity, about the importance of understanding that every small decision, every approval, every conversation, creates ripples in a company. I spoke the way I always do. Calm, steady, measured. And while the others took notes, nodded, and asked thoughtful questions, she sat there frozen, barely breathing. At one point, she lifted her hand slightly, like she wanted to ask something, but when our eyes met, she lowered it again. I could tell her mind was racing. She was trying to connect dots that didn't want to connect. How is he here? Why is he leading this? Why didn't anyone tell me? And then the big one, the one that must have hit her like a hammer. How long has he been above me without me knowing? When the session ended, the managers filtered out one by one. Some stopped to shake my hand again, thanking me for the guidance. She stayed seated, pretending to pack her things slowly, though her hands were trembling. When the last person left the room, the silence between us settled thick as fog. She didn't look up at first. She just whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice wasn't angry, it wasn't sharp. It was something else entirely. Small, maybe, or tired. I'm not sure. I took a breath before answering. "Tell you what?" I asked. My tone wasn't sarcastic. It was gentle, the way you'd talk to someone standing on the edge of something they're not ready to face. She raised her eyes then, and I saw a storm behind them. Hurt, confusion, maybe even guilt. "That you own this place," she said quietly. "That you're this." She gestured weakly toward the head of the table. I nodded, folding my hands in front of me. "Because it was never about you," I said. "I didn't build this to prove anything. I didn't hide it to spite you. Life just moved on, and so did I." She swallowed, her jaw trembling. "You let me work here," she said. "You signed my promotion." "You earned it," I replied. "Your work speaks for itself. I wasn't going to take that from you." She shook her head slowly, as if disbelief weighed it down. "I treated you terribly," she whispered. "And you just sat here letting me—" I held up a hand, not to silence her, but to stop the spiral I could see forming. "We don't get stronger by dragging old pain around," I said. "We get stronger by letting it go." Her eyes glistened. She closed them for a moment, then opened them again with a steadiness I recognized. One she must have had buried deep for years. "I'm sorry," she said. No excuses, no qualifiers. Just two words, raw and honest. I nodded once. "Thank you," I told her, and I meant it. She stood up, smoothing her blazer. "Do I still have a job?" I chuckled softly. "That's up to you. You want to stay? Stay. You want to go? Go. I'm not here to punish you." She didn't answer. She just gave a small nod and walked to the door. But before she left, she paused and said something I never expected to hear from her. "You deserved better." Then she was gone, leaving the room quieter than it had been all morning. I stayed there for a while, staring at the empty chair she'd sat in. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just grateful. Grateful that life had brought things full circle in a way that didn't require bitterness to feel complete. Some lessons don't need sharp edges. Some just need time. For the next few weeks after that leadership session, the building felt different. Not louder, not busier, just different. Like some invisible thread had been pulled loose and everyone sensed it without knowing why. People walked a little softer, Conversations ended a little quicker when I stepped into a room. That's the thing about companies. Word travels even when nobody says a word out loud. And she stayed. That surprised me at first. I half expected her to quit the next morning, pack her things, and vanish from the company entirely. But she didn't. She showed up every day, early sometimes, and threw herself into the work. I'd get reports from her department about improvements she'd implemented, issues she'd resolved, staff she'd helped. She was good. Better than I gave her credit for in the years we were together. Maybe she'd always had it in her. Maybe she just needed the right soil to grow in. But if I'm being honest, it wasn't easy for either of us. Every time I walked the floor and she caught sight of me, I could see the way her breath hitched, like she was bracing herself for something. And every time she walked into a meeting I was in, she sat straighter, talked with more caution, as if hoping her professionalism could rewrite our history. I didn't blame her. Healing is messy for everyone involved. One Friday afternoon, I was in my office going through quarterly projections when there was a soft knock on the door. I didn't say anything at first because most people knock, then wait for a "come in." But after a few seconds, the knock came again. Gentler, almost nervous. I knew it was her before she even opened the door. She stepped inside slowly, hands clasped together in a way I hadn't seen since the early years of our marriage. I nodded for her to take a seat, but she hesitated before finally sinking into the chair across from me. "I won't take much of your time," she said quietly. Her voice had lost that sharp edge she used to wield like a blade. Now it sounded careful, almost fragile. I felt I should talk to you." I leaned back and folded my hands. "Go ahead." For a long moment she said nothing. She stared down at her fingers, twisting them like she was trying to wring the nerves out of them. Then she looked up at me, and I saw the truth she'd been carrying. "When I left," she said, "I thought I was choosing a better life. I thought he—" She stopped, her jaw clenching before she forced herself to continue. "I thought he would take care of me, make everything easier." I didn't interrupt. I didn't move. I just listened, the way a man listens when he knows the person across from him needs to speak more than he needs to be right. "He changed," she went on. "Or maybe he was always that way and I didn't want to see it. At first he was sweet, supportive. Then the cracks showed. The comments about my weight, the way he'd check my phone, the nights he didn't come home. And I kept telling myself it was temporary, that relationships go through phases." She shook her head slowly. "But it wasn't a phase. It was who he was." I felt something inside me tighten, not out of desire or nostalgia, but out of the simple human recognition of someone who's hurting. "He left 3 months ago," she said. "Took the money I had saved, left me with the apartment lease and bills I couldn't pay. A friend helped me get settled again, helped me apply for new jobs, and somehow I ended up here." She let out a bitter breath. "Life has a sense of humor, doesn't it?" "It does," I said softly. She looked at me then, really looked at me. "I didn't come here to ask for anything. I don't want sympathy. Her voice cracked, barely enough to notice. "I wanted you to know that I regret the way I treated you. Not just at the end. For years. I see now how much I dismissed you, how little I appreciated what you did. You deserved better from me." I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." She swallowed hard, then went on. "And I want you to know something else. Working here, being part of this place, it's the first time in a long time I've felt like I'm building something. Like I matter. I don't want to lose that. Not because of our past." "You won't," I told her. "Your job is secure. Your work speaks louder than anything else." She let out a breath she'd been holding for years. "Thank you," she whispered. She stood to leave, then paused by the door. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When did it happen?" she asked. "When did you become this?" I smiled faintly. "When I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone and just lived my life. Turns out that's when things grow." She nodded slowly, letting the words settle. Then she walked out of my office with a quiet dignity she didn't have when she walked in. That night, after everyone had gone home, I walked the floors of the building like I used to when I worked nights. The hum of the machines was familiar, comforting. I passed the department she now supervised. Her light was still on. She was sitting at her desk, finishing paperwork, her brow furrowed in concentration. I didn't go in. I didn't disturb her. I just watched from the hallway for a moment, a silent acknowledgement that life had brought us both somewhere unexpected. As I headed back upstairs, I thought about how strange it is that the people who hurt us sometimes become part of our healing, not by coming back into our lives in the same way, but by standing across from us long enough for us to see how far we've come. And as I reached my office, I felt something settle inside me. Not the weight of the past, but the release of it. A sense of closure so soft and natural that I almost didn't notice it happening. But it did. A few days after that late-night walk through the building, I found myself thinking more about the road that had brought us both here. Not the marriage part. That chapter had long since closed, but the quiet stretch afterward, where I rebuilt myself one small decision at a time. It struck me that sometimes the real story isn't in the rise or the fall, but in the moment when you finally see yourself clearly, without the noise of what other people think you should be. Life kept moving. The company grew. New contracts came in. Departments reorganized. And through all of it, she showed up every morning with a steadiness that surprised me. She wasn't trying to please me. She wasn't trying to fix the past. She was simply doing the work, the way people do when they've decided to stop running from themselves. I respected that more than I ever thought I would. We didn't talk much after that conversation in my office. Not out of avoidance, more out of understanding. She gave me space and I gave her room to grow. Sometimes the kindest thing two people can do for each other is allow their lives to move without forcing them back into old shapes. Then one afternoon, something happened that brought the whole story into focus. A regional audit team came in for a surprise inspection. They were strict, the kind who flip every page twice and check every timestamp. Most departments handled it fine, but her team had some messy records from the previous manager. The auditors weren't happy. One of them told her, in front of her staff, that the mistakes could cost the company a major contract. Now, years ago, she might have panicked or shifted blame. But that day, she stepped forward, took responsibility, and calmly asked the auditors to give her 2 hours to reorganize the data. Her team looked at her like she'd just volunteered to carry a sinking boat on her back. But she got to work. I watched from a distance, leaning against the doorway as she coordinated her team. She wasn't harsh. She wasn't frantic. She was focused. She divided tasks, encouraged the newer employees, and kept everyone moving with a confidence I didn't remember from our years together. It wasn't a performance. It was real leadership. When the auditors returned, she handed them the corrected files with a quiet professionalism that didn't demand recognition. They went through everything, page by page, and eventually nodded. The department passed. A major contract was saved. Her team looked at her like she had just pulled them out of a storm. After the auditors left, she stepped into the hallway and let out a long breath. I walked over, not as her boss and not as her past, just as someone who saw the work she'd put in. "You handled that well," I said. She turned, startled. I could see that old flicker of uncertainty glint through her expression, but only for a moment. Then she nodded, a small smile forming at the corner of her mouth. "I'm trying," she said, "every day." "And it shows," I replied. She looked at me for a long second. "You know," she said finally, "I've spent so much time thinking about what I lost, I never stopped to think about what I could still build. I guess it took this place to show me that." I nodded. Life has a way of handing us the tools we didn't know we needed. "And sometimes," she said softly, "it puts the right people in front of us again. Not to fix things, but to understand them." She didn't mean it romantically, not at all. It was something gentler, an acknowledgement that we'd both survived something. And maybe that survival had made us better people on opposite ends of the same long road. From that day forward, something settled between us. Not friendship, not love, something quieter. A mutual respect. A recognition that two people can share a past without being defined by it. And that growth doesn't require an audience or applause, just willingness. A month later, the board held our annual meeting. We finalized expansions, approved a new charity initiative, and outlined the company's next 2 years. As the meeting wrapped up, one of the senior directors leaned over to me and said, That manager of yours, we've been watching her. She's got potential. I smiled. I know. But the truth is, I didn't help her because of potential or talent or future promotions. I helped her because life had helped me when I didn't deserve it. And I figured the only thing that made sense was to pass that kindness forward. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that builds, not breaks. About a week later, she requested a meeting. I assumed it was work-related, maybe something about budget approvals or staffing. But when she stepped into my office, she was holding a sealed envelope. She placed it gently on my desk. "This is my resignation," she said. I blinked. "You're leaving?" She nodded. "I think it's time. I've learned a lot here, more than you know. But I need a fresh start, one that isn't tied to our past. You gave me a place to stand when I didn't have one, and I'm grateful, truly. But I need to build something that's mine." I understood immediately. Some journeys need distance to finish maturing. Some stories need a final page turned before they become lessons instead of wounds. "I respect that," I said. She smiled softly, a real smile, the kind I don't think I'd ever seen from her before. "You taught me something without even trying," she said. "That strength doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it just stands still." She left on good terms. Her department held a small farewell for her. No drama, no bitterness, just clean closure. And as she walked out of the building one last time, I felt no anger, no regret, just peace. That night, I sat in my office long after the place had emptied out, looking around at the life I'd built, not to prove anything, but because it gave me purpose. I realized the story wasn't about revenge or power or even justice. It was about growth, both hers and mine. Life has a way of circling back, giving us the chance to see ourselves clearly. And sometimes the person who once broke you becomes the mirror that shows just how far you've come. And if you've walked through something similar, if life has twisted you around and left you wondering whether you'll ever find your footing again, stick around. I've got more stories to share, and I think you'll find pieces of yourself in every one of them.